There are numerous ways that law enforcement officers are going to approach the interview and interrogation situations as it pertains to a vulnerable adult and elder abuse issue. First of all is just the knowledge that law enforcement is in an investigative and criminal detection role. We're there to address any violations of the statute, and how we interview those people is going to determine in a lot of ways how we get disclosure of information. So some of the people that we need to interview is that vulnerable adult themselves. If they can't orally communicate, then we're going to have to figure out some of the resources to communicate in the way that vulnerable adult can, whether it's with sign language, whether we use speech pathologists that may use picture books, and if there are situations where they can't talk or they don't have visual acuity to be able to use tangible things in pictures, finding resources to be able to do that. In interviewing criminal suspects, and that's probably the most important issue here for a law enforcement officer, is, since we are focusing on criminal application of the statute, is we have to make a clear distinction. Do we have a witness or do we have a potential suspect? If we have a witness and someone we definitively know is just a witness who's objectively observed from the outside some situation, then we don't have to be as careful with the interview process. But when we have a caregiver or another person who's potentially violated a section of this law, and we're looking at them as a criminal suspect, certain protections come into play. The interview process may be one where we get disclosure of information, but because we've identified them as a criminal suspect, Fifth Amendment protections of somebody's right to refuse to answer may come into play, and that's where the terminology, a Miranda warning, would come into place. A defense attorney is going to have a very strong challenge against a law enforcement officer who has interviewed a identified criminal suspect who has incriminated themselves when the officer did not provide that Miranda warning. Because again, that's protection that's offered under our Constitution. And so for us, we have to look at it in two regards. Is a person a suspect or are they just a witness? And we have to make a clear distinction on what category they're in and putting those legal protections in place to secure the integrity of the conversation where it can come into a trial legally and be able to be used against the offender.